Hey guys, in this tutorial we're going to be looking at the wind effects on soft cloth. Basically what we're going to be doing is showing how you can create certain wind effects on your soft cloth, both your character clothing and other items in your scene as well, such as flags. So essentially what we're going to be doing is trying to recreate this scene you see here. Notice the nice flowing of Heidi's skirt here, as well as the wind effect on her sun hat. And she's kind of overlooking this nice ocean view here. Basically what we're going to be doing is trying to recreate this. Also wanted to note as well, this dress is from one of our developers, Celigon. You can find this in the content store or the marketplace as well. So let's go ahead and stop this. We're going to create a brand new scene. Scratch all this stuff here. And what I'm going to do is just go ahead and add that same character in. So we're going to go to our character, or rather our actors here, into our avatar folder. And we have an avatar folder called Celigon in the G6 style pack. I'm going to bring that same Heidi back in here, just because I like this dress. It's a good demo dress, so let's make sure this loads up here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a couple of other items. And for this I'm going to drag them from our Explorer window. And this is part of our G6 character empowerment pack. So I'm going to actually add in a different type of hair, a sun hat first. So I'm going to take this sun hat and we're going to drag that onto Heidi here. So just to see, you can click and drag stuff from your Explorer window as well. Go to our hair pack folder here. And I'm going to add this bun here, which I think is a bit more suitable for use with this sun hat. So we're just going to go then and take a look at Heidi's face. You can see it looks kind of strange because the hair is popping out through her sun hat. But that can be easily fixed if we go to our scene tab here and we just scooch this over a little bit. You can see we have a long hair, which is the original hair. So I can just go ahead and delete that. And then we have this bun hair, which is still showing through a little bit. So let's take a look at this. Let's select the sun hat here. And I'm going to press the W hotkey. And I'm going to move the sun hat up a little bit. Maybe rotate it forward a little bit as well. Something like that. And then move it up and backwards. I think that should be about good right there. Oh, maybe scooch it forward a bit there. Alright, I think we're good to go. Alright, so there's Heidi's nice looking sun hat right there. And this is what we're going to work with right now. So first of all, let's take a look at the dress. So I'm going to select Heidi, make sure Heidi is selected, go over here to materials, and we can use the material picker here, or we can just use the V hotkey, and then I can select her dress, and you can see RL dress gets selected in the material list right here. And then let's go over to the physics tab. And you can see we already have active physics on this dress. If we play it back right now, it's just going to like flop there and nothing's going to happen. So we want to add a little bit of wind. Now to do that, let's go all the way back down to the wind settings right here at the bottom of your physics tab right here. And we have a couple of things, a couple of parameters here. We have force, wind, strength, and gust frequency. Now if you're familiar with the speed tree tutorial, these last three should be pretty familiar to you. But the first one you might not be familiar with. But first of all, let's take a look at the difference here between the force, which is on the global axis, and the wind, which is on the local axis. Now the difference between the global and the local axis, in case you're not aware, is let's take a look at this little arrow thing at Heidi's feet here. So you can see the red arrow is pointing this way, the green arrow is pointing that way. And the red arrow actually stands for the x-axis, the green one stands for the y-axis, and the blue one stands for the z-axis. So if I move Heidi to the side a little bit, you can see we have what's called our scene root right here. And if you double-click items in the Content Manager, they'll automatically appear at the scene root. And this one has the same axes in the same positions as does our character. However, if I use the E hotkey and I rotate Heidi, say this way, for example, and then I press W again, and W one more time, you'll notice that now my values, the arrows are pointing in completely different directions. And that's because this is the local axis. This is the axis for my character or my prop or whatever. Every item has their own local axis. And this one here is always the global axis. So this one stays consistent no matter what position your items in your scene are in. So we can also check it by going up here. And you can see we currently have local move selected. I can change that to world move, and we can see that we are now at the global axis right there. So let's go ahead and press Ctrl Z a couple of times and bring Heidi back into her position. So let's get on to the wind now. Let's go ahead and take a look. Since we have the global and the local axis consistent here, just for simplicity's sake. Let's take a look at the force parameter first. So I'm going to focus on our dress here, and the x-axis, if you can recall, is going this way according to our arrow. So I'm going to put some force on the x-axis first. Let's put about 300 force on the x-axis. So if we play that back, you can see the skirt will sort of just suspend there in midair, almost like time has stopped. And that's because the force doesn't apply in gusts, it applies in a consistent force, obviously. So it's just going to suspend there like it looks like she's been stopped in time. So let's go ahead and stop that. Let's take down the x force there to 0. And let's go ahead and apply some wind now along the local axis, which, as you can recall, is currently the same as the global axis. So let's try something like negative 150 on the x-axis, which will go the opposite direction. We'll play that back. You can see we have, some fairly decent, soft gusts of wind just coming along there. And that's because we have the strength value pretty low. We also have the gust frequency pretty low as well. If we stop that, you can see down here. Let's try and increase that strength range a little bit and see what happens. You can see it gets a lot stronger, and the gusts of wind are, kind of going along there. What I like to do to create a more realistic wind effect is actually add a little bit of a counterbalance as far as the force is concerned. Now you can see the wind is along the x-axis at negative 150 this way. If I apply a counter force on the x-axis to maybe a positive 100, that'll actually help when the wind blows. As soon as the gust is finished, the force will actually force it back to its original position, and it looks a little bit better in my opinion. So you'll get something like this. You'll have the force kind of force it back once those gusts of wind have been applied, and the skirt will fall back to its original position a little bit faster. We get that kind of like wiggly, nice effect right there. So that's what I like to do when I'm applying, wind to a skirt or something like that. Just apply a little bit of a counter force to, bring it back into its position. Now let's take a look at the sun hat now, which is also a soft cloth physics item. So let's go ahead and select the sun hat here, and if we go into materials, we can select sun hat and then go to physics tab. And this one, if we apply the same amount of force, let's take a look at what happens if we do that. So again, negative 150 on the x-axis, increase that strength to 25 to 50% there. I think the gust was around 2.9. And it doesn't really matter if we apply the counter force for the hat. Let's take a look at what will happen. It'll kind of force the brim of her hat right through her face there, because we've applied too high of a force of wind for this particular item. So you'll have to kind of refine the parameters according to each item that you're using, according to each soft cloth. So for this one, I'd probably do something like negative 30, and on the x-axis we can do something like 20, just for a counterbalance there. And I think this should kind of create a good effect. And you can see it's kind of forcing that brim of her hat down a little bit too much. Maybe I want to add a little bit of a higher force on the on the z-axis here. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's bring it up to maybe 1200, and we'll see what it looks like when Heidi has a sombrero, because it'll flip up like this, and that's a little bit strange. That's not what we want. Let's go ahead and bring that back down to maybe 1000, and go ahead right there, and just a little bit of extra force. Maybe 1100 or 1500, or rather 1100. There we go. You get something like that. Yeah, that's even too much, I think. 1050 should be good. So you get something like that. It actually looks kind of nice when we had that value of 950. I like it when it kind of overshadows their face. So we'll just leave it at that for now. And that's about it for the character clothing. So let's go ahead and try it on something else. In this case, I'm going to create a flag. I'm going to go to my Content Manager here, into the Props tab, and in 3D Blocks, I'm going to find myself a cylinder, which should be somewhere down here. There we go. We'll just double-click that cylinder, and it'll apply it to the scene root. Let's move it to the side. And what I want to do is use the R hotkey to scale that down. So I'm going to scale it down to tiny little can size here. Here we go. And I'm going to scale it up on the z-axis. Let's zoom out a little bit so we can see a bit better. Ooh, that went pretty high. Alright, so I think that should be fine right there. So where can we find a flag? Well, the answer to that is in the props folder. We have a subfolder called physics, and then we have another subfolder called physics cloth right here. Cloth template gray. And we have this flag 1, which is a bit more of a draping flag, which I like, or this flag 2, which is a very straight edge. Let's go ahead and just double click this flag 1, add it to our scene, and then bring it into position, along our flag right here. I think we can rotate this. So we go to the attribute tab right here. We can rotate this along the y-axis. I think 90. Oh, that's the wrong direction. We'll do 270. There we go. So essentially what you want to do is you want to have these little black points here, which kind of pin the flag to its position along the the shaft of the flag here, the flagpole. And if you're not familiar with these little black points here on your weight maps, you may want to check out the tutorial on weight maps. These are essentially pinning this flag into position. So let's go ahead and maybe just resize this one a little bit and bring it down. I think that's a good flag size right there. There we go. Alright, so basically what's going to happen here, if I press play, we won't have any wind and the flag will just kind of, collapse like that onto the flagpole. So let's add some wind here. Go to our physics properties there. And again, this flag right now, if we press the W hotkey again, notice that the local axis is a lot different now than the global axis. So we're going to have to apply our wind along this local axis. So make sure we have local move selected. And so we can see the z-axis is now facing this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply some wind along the z-axis because we're going to want this flag to kind of flip over. Let's try something like 200 along the z-axis. And we need to increase that gust frequency, increase the range again there. I find this is the sweet spot for a lot of wind effects, those two values right there. You can see we get something interesting going on right there. But if you have like a company flag and you want the logo to be showing instead of like crumpled up there, you can go ahead and do this. We can add a little bit of force to the z-axis on the global axis. Again, if you recall, the z-axis on the global axis is pointing upwards. So let's go ahead and maybe add something like 100 to that and see if that makes any effect at all. Not much of an effect at the moment, so maybe we need to increase that to about, let's try 700 and see if that helps a little bit. Alright, so you can see it kind of shows the face of the flag a bit more. So obviously if you're creating some sort of commercial or something, you'd want to show the face of the flag a bit more. And you can even increase the amount of wind along the x-axis in this case, which is pointing upwards. You could put maybe 100 units of wind, and that should blow the flag up a little bit more like that. And maybe that's a little bit too much, but you can also, that one looks okay right there. But let's go ahead and try to bring that down the z-axis to about 500 force. That force seems a bit extreme. Alright, so maybe something like this would be ideal for, your commercial use or something like that. And there you go. So basically that's how you can, create gusts of wind on your character's clothing and on items in your scene. So let's go ahead and stop that. And that's basically all there is to it. Just to summarize here, when you're creating force, just make sure you're familiar with your global and your local axis, the differences between those. And it's always a good idea if you want a more kind of realistic wind effect to kind of counteract your wind gusts with a counteractive force. I find that works in a lot of different scenarios. And again, the key is experimenting with each individual soft cloth that you're using and just refining those parameters to get the effect you want. So again, guys, thanks for watching this tutorial. Hopefully you learned something about wind effects on soft cloth physics. And stay tuned for our other tutorials on physics in iClone.